from the mode of access uh, of Zizek. Um, Cave 1 or Cave 2? Um, so in Zizek, the first cave, or is it the first cave or the second cave? Um, let's say the second cave, where we now are, um, since history has come into um, Strauss's analysis of Plato, we have seemingly to take into account the development up to ourselves and the way back uh, to Plato, or put the other way, the metaphor, we have to dig our way up to the ignition of the even of the first fire that cast those first shadows, because we're now in a lower cave. Um, Either way, um, we have to wonder whether we're getting the interpretation of the first cave right. So Zizek's form of the cave would be the critique of ideology. So uh, Carl Jung speaks of the movement of the ideas across the centuries. So to have the ideas come down to us from Plato's time, when they were first with assiduity raised before Socrates, Plato, and before their forerunners, and constantly worked upon in the Platonic or Socratic dialectic. Um, so seemingly with Kant, Kant is still satisfied to um, do something that's more like similar to Socrates going back to the time before we were born to get the ideas. The ideas are always there. Um, their history does not matter. But Hegel says basically Kant has been dogmatic, or Kant has been sort of doing reasoning, but that's not good enough. We need it. We need these ideas right here directly, and we need to be so close to them that we are like that. The joke with the David Foster Wallace thing about the principal fish asked the school fish, "How's the water, boys?" And then they just walk on and totally ignore him, and because his remarks seem so idiotic to them. They don't know what does he mean, the water. They don't even ask themselves that, because they just assume it's the idiot talk of this principle. So um, this would be, for example, our notion of that we take so much for granted about the so-called equality, that all citizens are equal. That's probably in some way prepared by Descartes, because Descartes makes everything so. He removes the consideration of the body, which would be an ordinary consideration, because women are manifestly, in general, smaller than men, and that has real consequences. But once you and when even when Plato said what is also more or less common sense, some women may be better than some men in philosophy. Um, this presupposes a rarefied garden where only the intellect matters and everything else doesn't matter, including the body, because the philosopher, properly so-called, would be dead, because they're just in speech. They're building something eternal in speech. Um, so if you think of these ideas from Hegel's point of view, Hegel wants to say we must be at the end of history, where we've simply received them. And then, since we're at the absolute, only then can we find out what all the uh, relative parts are from the absolute. The absolute is the light in which we understand the relative. So, um, this principle of of the equality corresponds to what Hegel is saying, is that there's, in retrospect, from the absolute, we can see that there was once upon a time this notion of a sovereign, but he doesn't actually say sovereign might be potentially, you could say that's only came into proper existence in the Middle Ages or in the time of the absolute states, maybe, but there was something like a tyrant or somebody who claimed freedom over everything, like Dionysus on Syracuse. It's like, I own this place, I'm free, I can make the laws the way I want, everything. So there's one person who was free, and then you come to the principle that a number of people are free, as in the Roman Republic, and then finally there's the dialectic leads you to the this transformed, twisted notion of freedom, which actually turns out to be the absolute from which the rest should be judged from, which is all are free. So you can see that freedom doesn't mean something like the tyrant Dionysus anymore. It means whatever small freedom it means today, and then that's, in retrospect, the standard from which we see what true freedom is, and then we try to come into correspondence with that. So according to Zizek's notion, we'd have to ask something like, ideology says you are a citizen, or ideology says you are a woman, or ideology says you are a waiter, or whatever it is, and then the person can propose to ask, well, why do I have to be that? And then there's this long discussion, as we know nowadays, comes forward where people try to shift away from the identity that ideology is put on them. So you can see in Zizek we see kind of a very distorted view of what Socrates was doing in a specific manner, happening in a half unconscious, half unaware of what the motives are away in the political sphere, where the ideas are being used in their practical guise as identities and forced identities in various forms, and they're being litigated over. So then again, I ask you, is that at all still connected to what Plato was saying originally? Can we actually access what Plato was saying originally in any other way but just these simple kind of phrases, like going from the opinions to the truth, which don't really show us what Plato was thinking? And even if we tried to understand what Plato was thinking, aren't there too many a storm of too many other things have come into the consideration already, so that we can't quite reach it? And then we can start to move towards the problems of classical philology, as opposed to what Heidegger understands as proper thinking, in the fine points of this sort of methodology of where is the past? Are we to place ourselves sort of close to the past right now? Is the past still here? Like the Hannah Arendt, or likes to cite Faulkner, with the past is not even past. So are we only able to place ourselves in the past when we really get to the past? Would that be the only way to be like Plato? And is that even possible? Wouldn't we always be some Unheimlichkeit or uncanniness there, instead of actually coming into coincidence with Plato? Or is it rather that we can simply do a notional type in a current classicist way, and have ourselves an object in some sense to look at, but kind of judge from that object the standard from which to go on?